It is the morning news, and as advertised, Charles Ross, Yakima County Auditor, is on the phone with us this morning. Good morning, Charles.
Good morning, Dave.
How are you, man? I haven't seen you in forever.
I know. I hear in the promo, man. I hope you'll meet me over at the shop and buy me a guitar so I can learn how to play maybe like Metallica or something in my spare time. Can either of you guys do that?
I have to say,
I can play Smoke on the Water.
Well, yeah, there you go, man.
First three notes, right?
Who can't?
I've always secretly just obsessed and wished that I could play an electric guitar, but I've tried a couple times, and man, it's horrible.
How's your air guitar? Because I got that down pretty good.
No one complains on that
one. Right on. Okay, well, that's a good launch pad right there. Speaking of complaints, man, do you still get complaints about our mail-in balloting system, don't you?
Yeah, we call it an evergreen issue here, and it really, like I've told you and Dave in the past, one thing I learned after getting this job is that elections in so many ways is very cyclical. It's amazing how you see the same patterns repeating over and over and over. But I've also come to the conclusion that there tends to be same repeating messages over and over and over. And I was kind of flashing back through some of the stuff that I kept from, the Trump first election, and I couldn't have a conversation with anybody back then going into November and without the word Russian bot, even to the point where the secretary had told us, don't say that, and I kind of went the other way and just pointed out all the time that, we haven't seen any of those Russian bots, showing up to vote yet. And, there's a little bit of humor in there, but people back in that election cycle were just some people were just absolutely certain that there was some kind of bot going on or Russian influence. And I mean, you guys are in the, news and editorial business. And I mean, when it all kind of shook out in the end and then it became, it was like, oh, the Russians were definitely helping, Donald Trump. Well, helping them win an election, if that were to even happen through Facebook and sending out messages. And I mean, I can't tell you how many election-related emails come to my email and my text message system. I'm just inundated by this stuff, right? And I do not consider that election tampering because it has nothing to do with the mechanics of the election. Now, if it changes your mind and those Russian bots that are sending nonstop, vote for candidate X or some horrible story about candidate Y.
Sure.
I just don't typically go down that road anymore other than to make a joke or two about I haven't seen a bot in here yet, kind of a thing. But this year, it's strange how now it is set up to where instead of it being specific to the Russians or these computer bots, now it's just voter fraud.
Yeah.
Kind of in general. And the first thing I thought I would bring up, in talking with you guys, and, I find it really hard to understand how, on one hand, President Trump has said and sent out tweets and communications saying that, absentee ballots are fine. He uses them and he believes they're fine, but mail-in ballots are easily corruptible. So if either of you can explain to me the difference
I was just going to say, what's the difference?
I would like to hear that.
I'll take a stab at it.
Okay.
Okay. The idea that a person has to present a case for need, which theoretically you have to make a case to get an absentee ballot, right? Back in the day, if you said, look, here's my reasoning, all that is a little more effort. Versus it just showed up in my mailbox, and that's all the effort that it took. And while that isn't a big break-off or difference, I think it's when it comes down to what kind of actions people will take, it's a significant enough difference. Technically, they are the same. It's I get a ballot and I mail it in, but the process to get one versus having it handed to you, I think is a little different. And I think the idea that the person has to be on record as requesting that kind of puts a spotlight on them, and then if something doesn't go as it was supposed to, there's a little more scrutiny on them, as opposed to if it just showed up and I somehow did something fraudulent with it. Those are two examples. I have no idea if those things can really happen or not, but I mean, I have enough of a twisted imagination, Charles, that I could see the potential. But even more than that, I got to ask you about organizations like the Heritage Foundation and others that I think have some respectability behind them. They have concerns. We see towns with more ballots going to them than there are registered living people. You see, I don't know if you saw the article that we posted about your pending visit with us, talking about how many dead people still get ballots, that sort of thing. There are enough different threads that I think the president, in a I guess despite his electoral victory, people still call it a razor-thin win, given the margins in 5 states. Do you subscribe to that? That it was a narrow national win?
Oh, I think clearly. I mean, I think we are living in this age of where the society, depending on who you're listening to, whether you understand the Electoral College or not and what its real purpose is versus popular voting, there's two diametrically opposed concepts built into that, and it's called fairness of voting, and that the giant populous areas are going to be offset and made more fair against the nation, because remember, we are a group of states that are held together by nationalistic values. But kind of going back to what you're saying, Dave, I mean, I think there's two arguments here. These states, there's a few of us that have been doing this for many, many years. Washington State is probably one of the early adopters of what is called vote at home or vote by mail. And it was actually done systematically through the voting initiative, really, I mean, in many ways. And then also the legislature then forced the last few remaining counties who were objecting to it, and that's where they used it 2011. But Yakima County went 2005. So you figure all those years we've been perfecting this methodology. And if you remember right, back in, the Dino Rossi-Gregoire race, that was one that was for the record books, right?
Right.
There were horrible. I mean, if you bring that report up in a group that involves King County elections officials, their faces get very, very red.
Yeah.
And rightfully so, right? And I think the lesson from that was that they were, in essence, operating two completely different voting systems. There was mail-in voting, whether you called it absentee voting at the time or anything like that, and then they were conducting straight-up, real-on-poll voting sites. And they found during the run-out after that there was missing ballots and found ballots and all these anomalies, and we all know the story who follow politics on that, right? Immediately after that, the legislature got in gear and started saying, wow, this is problematic. We need to streamline, we need to make more efficient and build in securities. So as a guy who used to have a lot of criticism about this whole concept, even though I was a user and have been ever since I was in the U.S. Navy, I remember filling out my military ballot that I got 30 days earlier than everybody else, and selecting my presidential ballot and watching it fly off the aircraft carrier on the COD plane and hoping that it got back to Yakima County in time to make a difference.
Right.
So we have a very diverse population, Lance, Dave, that people move to Arizona, they still want to participate. We forward ballots to them. And the other thing is, you individual, we don't have enough time on the radio station to go through all of the crazy security methods we have in place. So I'm not going to just argue against you when you say there are weaknesses in this system, because there are weaknesses in this system. But it seems to me to have been adopted at very high levels of percentage by the voters. And, this is one of the things I firmly believe in, is that this is a country and a state that lives by the majority of voters. If the majority of the people decide, even if I don't like it, I'm going to comply.
Yeah, no, I hear you, Charles.
And as a county auditor, my job is to come down here and absolutely fairly impose those laws that are written. And if we don't like the laws, we need to go change the laws, right?
Yeah.
Let me just interject here, because we're going to run out of time. But Charles, I have no doubt. I trust you 100%. I totally do. And I trust that the time that you've had on this job and the homework you've done on our system and all of that, that you're comfortable and confident of how things work here. No question. There is the question, though, about what's called on one side ballot harvesting. where individuals can round up ballots for
Right.
others and deliver them, and the concern about that, and some of the concerns that we're hearing from other states and other places. Now, you were a longtime member of the minority in the legislature, and so you have a certain perspective. When you see the left tripping over themselves to go to nationwide balloting like this, does that not raise any concerns to you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I think that if you try to jam this in between now and when you're going to theoretically mail ballots to people for the first time ever, I think that's crazy. I mean, there's just no way around that. I mean, we have, we being the people before me, Dave, Corky ran this office before me. She was a Democrat, one of the few elected Democrats. She hired all these folks, and so I sometimes laugh saying that, now we're hearing from the Democrat Party that because I'm a Republican, there's funny things happening up here. But in reality, we're running the same set of laws, and we make tweaks to them every year to make them better. But to your point, there are states out there that even when I read like what happened in Patterson, for example, in New Jersey, those are corrupt people doing corrupt things with ballots. There's no question. But rest assured, any election manager or electioneer that has any ability will see those immediately. And I go to Wapato when Juan Orozco ran his races down there. Immediately we saw anomalies happening that were very, very obvious to us. Twice as many ballots being rejected for signature problems, a significant increase in turnout, which could have just been aggressive campaigning, first-time registered voters who don't really know how to do it. And this is where I get kind of stingy, saying that what I really don't like and have always voted against is that for us to be able to look at voters in the eye and say, trust this system, we have to also admit that we're tilting towards convenience and in-home voting and accessibility, all those things. Well, when you go down that road, you are naturally giving up, securities. Because the most secure would be you have to show up in front of me, present your information.
Right.
I will validate your precinct, make sure you get the right ballot. You got about 10 minutes to vote it out in the hallway, and then we're taking it back from you. And that is one of the ways that it happens in this country. I'm just here to say, as a human being, when I look at election night in November in some of the most horrible weather in this country, and I see people standing blocks and blocks and blocks to wait to do that, I just, in my heart, feel we in America are better than that. And I really think that's where most of these states have said, vote by mail may have a few issues, and depending on how your state legislature behaves, some states say, look, you get one ballot. If you mess that ballot up, you got to come in and cure it. In this state, we're too far to the easy side. We send you a letter, we call you, we go 10 million miles to make sure your vote will count, which some voters appreciate that, some of us don't. Because to me, if you can't get the signature right the first time and we send you a letter and it's still a mismatch, to me that ballot should be spoiled and just not participate in the election, which is what we saw in Juan's race down there. It exposed one of the big gaps, but I can't just arbitrarily say, well, I'm Chuck Ross and I think that that's vote fraud. Yeah. I waited and we talked to Joe Brusick. This whole thing's run by 3 elected people, me, the county prosecutor, and the county commissioner that serves on the board. We have to vote by majority 2-1 to discount a ballot, to throw a ballot out.
Is that by design of where the people come from? Because in our case, they'd all be Republicans. So in those states where that group would all be Democrats, and they were looking to to ignore those mismatched signatures or something. The whole point, Charles, is again, I don't expect you to indict the system. It's where you work, it's where you live,
right.
and it's your integrity on the line for Yakima. And like I said, you have the highest integrity, as in my opinion. I'm concerned that in other states that are, and I think that's what Trump's concern is.
Yeah.
That in other states where Democrats rule, the prospect of the opportunity to do stuff because the people watching already want the outcome to come a certain way rather than the outcome to be fair by everybody. That's his concern. And when the margins are razor thin, the Electoral College works if you take your state. And if you take 3 states by 3,000 votes each, you still get all of those electoral votes. But that's not a lot of votes, and that's where the voter fraud comes in. If you lose that state, you lose those electoral votes. Yeah. And an election decided by 5 states, votes,
You got it.
that's where the focus is. So
well, and again, most all election centers, I would imagine nationwide. I mean, I have never dealt to this level. Are open to public inspection, and if you don't have a high degree of trust in your system wherever you live, you better be getting into your election office and starting to expose those things, because, like the Patterson, New Jersey case points out, it is detectable. It is usually obvious, but elections are a contract with the citizenry, right?
Right.
It starts with that oath. There is no validation. That oath is you're promising to be what you say you be, right? And that's just, we have to accept that. The Supreme Court has said that definitively. But going back to what you said, Dave, this is probably the most highly contested, combative, close presidential election. This blows the Chad issue in Florida out of the water, in my opinion.
Yes,
so
sir.
this is going to be one of those things where, and then we have COVID on top of it, right? I mean, we've been doing things down here. Kathy's been buying stuff and trying to make it work for these folks who come in and handle our ballots, because we don't use volunteers anymore. These are all paid, trained staff that are it's like an OR procedure.
Yep.
You ask a cardiologist, what's the most important thing to them when it comes to your patient outcome, Dave, when you have a heart surgery? Redundancy, practice, working with the same people. That's what we look at in elections. We do it the same. We all work together, and we play by the rules every single time, even if we think there's something going on. But if there's no clear definitive evidence, there's no victim, like in Wapato, not one person came to me and said, hey, my vote that's not my thing. They all participated in something, and in the end we heard all these things. But then here's the gleaming truth in all this, and I believe this or I wouldn't be sitting here. I look at Wapato an election cycle later, and not one single person affiliated with that whole thing has anything to do with that government. Their citizens literally threw those people out the doorstep.
Yeah.
And that's what I want, is a country that runs itself. I don't want bureaucrats sitting around, telling us exactly what to do every time. And that's why Joe Brusick, myself, and if it's Norm Johnson or Vicki Baker or Ron Anderson, guess who we answer to? The voters at large. So if they think I'm not doing it right, they have every opportunity to come and either talk to me about it, run against me in an election, make their case, and if they're right, I'm wrong, we're done. I'm done. Yeah. And we get a change. And that's why I always tell you guys, your local political people are the most important people you're voting on every single election cycle.
Well, would that all of them have your values, your ethics, your viewpoint, and your approach, Charles?
Yeah, I will say this. In Washington State, I have been blown over at the level of professionality, and actually they're ahead of us because we're small counties. Some of these larger counties, we're stealing their ideas because they're just better on not all things, just like I think voter cure forms. It's very simple. You get a chance to cure that ballot, meaning match that signature one time. It's like one and done. And then we're just saying you can't do it by mail anymore. You got to come in, and that's where sometimes I think Washington, because of the majority-minority makeup, we tend to tilt quickly to convenience. And like I'm a firm, I do not support people being able to be registered in facilities that don't have a lot of experience around this issue, like healthcare clinics. And the DMV, I'm not even really sure. They've made some pretty big mistakes lately that usually the 39 counties can get in there and figure it out and talk to people and say, hey, there was a system error and it said you wanted to register. Are you sure? Because that can really make life miserable for somebody who is on a citizen track, and just because they interacted with a government facility and now they get a ballot, that can really harm their ability to become a citizen. And we send letters saying this was a systematic error. Wow. They themselves did not ask for that ballot. Some bureaucrat did. And that's the stuff I argued against in the legislature. And I always said, look, if you want to go to automatic voter registration, it's very simple. If you can get if you can get an enhanced driver's license, their name should just automatically be sent to me because they've met every standard higher than we can ask for in any other form. I love that. I wish we would have done that, but that's when politics wiggles in, Dave. And you know what I'm saying.
Yes, I do.
Republicans are always going to say it's voter fraud and there's people rigging the systems. Democrats are always going to say you're disenfranchising people by talking to them about their election process.
Right.
And the reality is right in the middle.
Well, Charles, I will say two things. One last question for you and one statement. The takeaway from this morning's interview, the headline will be Yakima County Auditor admits to stealing. So that's, there's that.
I'm not writing that headline.
There's that to look forward to.
I promise not to waste taxpayer resources in reinventing wheels.
There you go. That's good. The other question. Now that I'm laughing, I'm kind of losing my place as to what it was going to be that I was going to ask you. So we will let you get on with your day, and if I think of it, I'll shoot you an email or something.
And as the election drones on, we like to, anytime you want to get us on, either tape or just a friendly reminders. Remember, you're going to look at a ballot that's going to have 38 names associated with the governor. So look carefully. It's 2 columns. It's a ton of names. There's a ton of parties that are new. You haven't seen this stuff a lot. All your other state races are on there. And then if you have a local precinct officer race, even if there's 3 people, whoever gets the most votes wins on your neighborhood precinct officer committee. And then we have one, one very specific county issue that's on the ballot too that only affects people, in that area. That's a special purpose district question. But big ballot, long ballot, take your time. But my last recommendation to voters, please get your ballot back to us as soon as possible so that we can get results certified sooner, because people love to know the results and then they start hammering on us because we're 4, 5, 6, 7 days after election. Well, when we receive 30,000 ballots in November on election day, I'm sorry, it takes a while because we look at every one of them. It's a very slow process. So vote early. Sign your ballot. The ballot you receive in the mail is your official ballot. You can get it replaced, like Lance has said. I can send you 20 ballots. I really can. But the first one I get back that belongs to you shuts your voting window.
That's the question I was going to ask you. Yeah, what if I get 2 or 3? But it doesn't matter on my side. It's your side. So you get one in my name, and that's shut.
That's right. We have people literally come in on election day. They're with a group of friends. They come in and they say, hey, I got to vote. We ask them all their information, look them up in the system, and we say, your ballot got here 5 days ago. Oh, that's right. I did do that. I mean, that's human. Sure. We do that. People forget. And thankfully, we've been doing this for almost, since 2005, and our system's pretty good. They just put a new one in. It's real time. I mean, and then we here, Kathy Fisher and Yolanda, we take a lot of extra precautions to make sure if we're doing anything on election day that just seems strange. It's a provisional ballot. We wait until the very end of the cycle for the system to completely wash out, and King County voters are credited, so we know that the person maybe didn't vote over there and here. We're doing everything we can, but I'm a realist. If a person wants to commit fraud, it's just like car theft, man.
Sure.
Car theft happens all over the country, all over the nation, but it's not an orchestrated car theft ring. And we all own cars, right?
Right.
And I'm not so afraid of car theft that I won't buy my car or trust that my car is there in the morning.
Good point. Yeah. I think I've heard you say it before, that it's a system that, it's kind of a system that's married with a lot of honesty out there. You got to be honest as a voter.
Yep. It is a contract.
One of the things that I'm going to say is I think you're going to honestly be impressed by how closely I can mimic Tormy's signature this year. You watch for that. You want honesty, Charles.
Just tell me which day it's coming in.
All right, buddy. Mr. Charles Ross, our Yakima County duly elected auditor. Thank you, sir, for your time this morning and all the information. Lots to think about, and I think you relaxed a lot of concerns for folks that maybe had some questions.
Yeah.
And we appreciate your offering more time as we get closer to the election. So thanks very much, Charles.
Thank you very much.
Charles.